All right, so you finished reading the first four Stormlight Archive books, and now you're looking at Wind and Truth. This is it, the big one, like over 1,300 pages to wrap up this whole first arc. And you're probably thinking, is it good? Is it worth my time? What are the reviewers saying? We've got a ton of reviews here, a mix of professional critics and just like average readers. And we're going to dive deep into them today.
Yeah, this is a big one. And the reviews, they're not all glowing. You know, Sanderson, he usually delivers, but Wind and Truth, it's a bit divisive. It definitely delivers on like the epic scale that you expect from a Sanderson finale. It's got huge action sequences and answers a lot of big questions.
Yeah.
But the way he gets there, the execution, well, that's what's got people talking.
So it's not a slam dunk for everyone. I mean, Sanderson, he's known for being like consistently good.
Yeah.
What are people getting hung up on?
Well, a lot of it comes down to the writing style. Sanderson's never been like super poetic, you know. He's always been more about plot and world building. But in Wind and Truth, it feels even more simplified. Almost mechanical at times.
Mechanical.
Yeah, like just very functional prose, which honestly, it works well enough during the action scenes. Those are still super exciting. But some reviewers are saying that it makes the slower, more emotional moments fall a little flat.
I can see that. Especially in a book this long. You need those quieter moments to breathe.
Exactly.
And
does it feel like he's sacrificing character development just to keep the plot moving?
not necessarily. I mean, characters like Delinar and Kaladin, they still have really satisfying arcs in this book, but the way their emotional journeys are portrayed, it can feel a bit uneven.
Uneven how?
Well, one reviewer mentioned this therapy scene.
Oh, yeah, I saw some people talking about that online.
And it was described using all this like modern therapy terminology.
Yeah, didn't sound very Rocheran to me.
Right. It felt really jarring and out of place in this fantasy setting.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to force modern sensibilities onto a world that has its own unique culture and history.
Exactly. And I think that ties into a broader criticism about the book's humor.
Yeah, and also how it tackles mental health. Like, Sanderson's intentions are good, but the execution can feel a bit heavy-handed.
Okay, I'm sensing a pattern here. It sounds like Wind and Truth is struggling to balance its epic scope with the kind of nuanced character work that Sanderson's known for.
That's a great way to put it. And it's something that even Sanderson's most devoted fans are struggling with. You know, there are a lot of comparisons being drawn to Hero of Ages.
Hero of Ages.
Yeah, the final book in his Mistborn trilogy.
Interesting. What are the similarities?
Well, both books involve similar plot devices,
Nice.
like big reveals about ancient history and characters who are grappling with the powers of like these competing gods.
So kind of similar themes.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but some readers are feeling a sense of been there, done that.
Right, like he's falling back on a formula.
Exactly. And the length of Wind and Truth, it kind of exacerbates this issue. The book uses this 10-day countdown structure leading up to the final confrontation, which can feel repetitive and drawn out at times.
You know, even in the positive reviews, I'm seeing a lot of comments about the pacing. Some people love the urgency it creates, but others find it bloated and unnecessarily convoluted.
It's definitely divisive. One reviewer said it was the best-paced one, even more so than Words of Radiance.
What?
And another one said it was the most bloated book they've ever read, and that Sanderson's formula is too old now.
Ouch. So even the pacing, which is usually a strength for Sanderson, seems to be a point of contention here.
It is, and it all feeds into this larger concern about the book's overall focus. Like, Wind and Truth is juggling a lot. Multiple character arcs, world-altering reveals, expanding the Cosmere lore, and setting up future storylines.
That's a lot.
It's a massive undertaking, and some readers feel like it's trying to do too much at once.
Okay, so we've got a mixed bag here. Epic scale, huge reveals, but also concerns about simplified writing, uneven pacing, and potentially repetitive plot devices. It sounds like Wind and Truth might be a bit overwhelming, even for diehard Sanderson fans.
That's a fair assessment. It's definitely a book that demands a lot from its readers. But that doesn't mean it's not worth reading. It just means you need to go in with the right expectation.
With the right expectation.
Yeah.
So, okay, Wind and Truth. It's demanding. It's not just a light, fun read. It's something you really got to commit to. But what does that commitment get you? Like, is it actually worth it for, like, the average Sanderson fan?
I think so, yeah. Especially if you're invested in the Stormlight Archive specifically. You know, this book is the end of the first arc. It's wrapping up years of storylines, answering questions that have been lingering since The Way of Kings. So for readers who've been on this journey with these characters, the payoff is huge.
But let's be honest, some of those payoffs sound kind of familiar. You mentioned the Hero of Ages parallels. Doesn't it get a bit repetitive for people who've read a lot of Sanderson's work?
Yeah, there's definitely a risk of that. Like Sanderson's known for certain tropes. Hidden magic systems, ancient prophecies, characters who turn out to be much more than they seem. And Wind and Truth, it does lean into some of those familiar elements.
Like those big reveals you talked about.
Mhm.
Are those truly groundbreaking, or are they just more of the same?
Oh, they're definitely significant. Wind and Truth delves deeper into the Cosmere. That's Sanderson's interconnected universe, for those who aren't familiar. And specifically, it explores the nature of the Shards.
Okay, hold on. The Shards, for those of us who need a refresher.
Right. The Shards are these incredibly powerful beings. They embody fundamental aspects of reality. Things like honor, odium, cultivation. They influence the magic systems and the history of the planets in the Cosmere.
So is Wind and Truth revealing something new about these shards, something that changes how we understand the Cosmere as a whole?
Absolutely. We get glimpses into their origins, their motivations, even their limitations. It's a level of depth we haven't seen before, and it has implications that reach far beyond the events of this book.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal, even with the flaws we've talked about. It's not just wrapping up the first arc of Stormlight, it's expanding our understanding of the entire Cosmere.
Exactly. And it ties into the book's central theme of truth. Sanderson isn't just giving us answers, he's challenging us to question those answers. He's showing us how truth can be manipulated, how even seemingly absolute knowledge can be incomplete or misleading.
So it's more than just a big action-packed finale. There's like a philosophical layer to it as well.
Absolutely. Wind and Truth, I think, encourages us to think critically, to question assumptions, to recognize that there's always more to learn.
That's actually pretty cool. It makes me think of all the misinformation we encounter in the real world, how easy it is to be swayed by half-truths and biased perspectives. This book almost feels like a warning in a way.
I think that's a valid interpretation. Sanderson is asking us to be careful consumers of information, to recognize that truth is often complex and multifaceted. It's not always black and white.
Okay, so Wind and Truth has flaws, but it also has a lot of depth and thematic resonance. I'm still not sold on the pacing, though. This 10-day countdown structure. Even if the payoff is big, does it really need to be stretched out over 1,300 pages?
Well, that's where the reader opinions really diverge. Some people found the countdown thrilling. It created this intense sense of urgency as the characters are racing against time. But others felt like it was just padding, repeating the same beats over and over.
See, that's what worries me. I'm the kind of reader who gets impatient with drawn-out plots. I love Sanderson's world building and magic systems, but I need the story to keep moving.
I understand that concern. And to be honest, there are sections of Wind and Truth that feel a bit repetitive, especially in the first half, where we're jumping between multiple perspectives, and not all of them are equally engaging.
Okay, so if I'm going into this expecting a tight, perfectly paced narrative, I might be disappointed. But if I'm willing to be patient, to trust that Sanderson is building towards something truly epic,
Then I think you'll find Wind and Truth incredibly rewarding. It's a book that rewards close reading and careful attention to detail, and the reveals when they come, they're genuinely mind-blowing.
so maybe not for everyone, but for the right reader, it could be an amazing experience. But let's be practical for a moment. Say you're a Sanderson fan, you've read some of his other work, but not all of it. Is Wind and Truth a good starting point?
Definitely not. Wind and Truth is deeply rooted in the Stormlight Archive's lore and character arcs. It's the culmination of 4 previous books. Jumping in here without that context would be like starting a TV series in the final season.
So if I'm new to the series, I should start with The Way of Kings and work my way through.
Exactly. You need that foundation to truly appreciate the scope and impact of Wind and Truth.
All right, fair enough. But let's say I'm a fantasy fan who's enjoyed Sanderson's other work, like Mistborn, but I'm intimidated by the sheer size of Stormlight. Are there any smaller, more accessible entry points into the Cosmere? That might lead me to Stormlight eventually.
Absolutely. Warbreaker is a great standalone novel that's set in the Cosmere. And it has some intriguing connections to the Stormlight Archive. It's a much quicker read than any of the Stormlight books. And it gives you a taste of Sanderson's world building and interconnectivity.
Okay, that's good to know. So we've established that Wind and Truth is not for the casual reader. It's a commitment, it's demanding. But for the dedicated Stormlight fan, it sounds like it delivers a powerful and satisfying conclusion to this first arc.
Absolutely. And it's not just an ending, it's a beginning. Wind and Truth opens up so many possibilities for the future of the Stormlight Archive and the Cosmere as a whole.
All right, well, now I'm even more curious to see where Sanderson goes from here. But before we get into those possibilities, let's talk about you, the listener, and what you should do with all this information.
Great idea. Ultimately, the decision of whether or not to read Wind and Truth rests with you. We've given you the lay of the land, the strengths, the weaknesses, the potential rewards. Now it's up to you to decide if this journey is right for you.
Okay, so Wind and Truth is a journey, like any good journey. It's not just about the destination, right? It's about, like, what you learn along the way.
Yeah.
What are some of the big takeaways from this book, both for, like, the characters and for us as readers?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is this idea that truth is multifaceted. It's not always straightforward or easy to grasp. When in truth, it really challenges us to question what we believe, to look beyond those surface appearances and to really dig deeper.
That's a super relevant message, especially these days. It's like we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
Exactly.
It's hard to know what to trust.
Right. And Sanderson, he doesn't offer any easy answers. He
Yeah.
presents us with these really complex characters who are all grappling with their own versions of truth, and they often have conflicting viewpoints. It's up to us as readers to sift through the evidence and form our own conclusions.
Okay, I like that. It's not just passively consuming the story, it's actively engaging with it, thinking critically about the ideas.
Right. And I think that's what makes Wind and Truth so rewarding, even with its flaws. It's a book that stays with you. It makes you think about the world in a different way.
So, big picture, how does this book change things for the Stormlight Archive? Like, what's the landscape after this massive climax?
Well, for starters, the power dynamics on Roshar, they've been completely shaken up. Odium, the big bad of the series, has been defeated. But there's this sense that this is just the beginning of a new conflict.
Oh, so it's not a happily ever after ending. There are still threats looming.
Absolutely. Remember those revelations about the Shards? Well, those have major implications for the future of the Cosmere. We learn that there are other Shards out there with their own agendas and powers, and they're starting to take notice of what's happening on Roshar.
Okay, so the scope is widening. We're moving beyond this one planet, this one conflict, stepping onto a bigger stage.
Exactly, and that's incredibly exciting. We're seeing these connections between different Cosmere worlds, hints of future conflicts and alliances. It's like Sanderson is setting up this massive chessboard, and the pieces are just starting to move.
That makes me think of Warbreaker and how that seemingly standalone story is now like woven into this larger tapestry. It's like all those seemingly small details that Sanderson throws in, they suddenly become much more significant.
Exactly, and that's what makes rereading Sanderson's work so rewarding. Knowing what we know now, going back to earlier books, you start to see foreshadowing, hidden connections, things that you might have missed the first time around.
It's like solving a puzzle.
Precisely, and that's the beauty of the Cosmere. It's this living, breathing universe, and Wind and Truth has opened up so many new avenues for exploration.
All right, so if you're a Sanderson fan, this book is clearly a game changer. It's not just an ending, it's a launching pad for like a whole new era of storytelling. But I'm still thinking about those readers who were disappointed, who felt like Wind and Truth didn't quite live up to their expectations. What would you say to them?
I would say this. Even if you didn't love every aspect of Wind and Truth, there's no denying its significance. It's a book that pushes boundaries, it takes risks, and it sets the stage for something truly epic. Give it time to settle, maybe even reread it, with the knowledge of where the Cosmere is headed, and you might find a newfound appreciation for it.
Okay, so maybe it's not a perfect book, but it's an important one. It's a turning point, a shift in perspective, and it lays the groundwork for a future that's full of possibilities.
Exactly, and who knows, maybe those readers who are disappointed, they'll find their favorite book in this next phase of the Stormlight Archive. After all, Sanderson's always got something up his sleeve.
Well, you've definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope you, the listener, feel the same way. Wind and Truth is a complex book, and there's no easy answer to the question of whether or not you should read it, but hopefully this deep dive has given you the insights you need to make an informed decision.
And if you do decide to take the plunge, be prepared for a wild ride. Wind and Truth is just the beginning of an epic journey, and I can't wait to see where it takes us next.
That's the beauty of Sanderson's work, isn't it? It's always evolving, always expanding, always pushing the boundaries of what's possible in fantasy. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.